Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Take 3. Okay, Akhi, just want to start off with for the brother who had requested this video. He had asked me a long time ago, and just life is crazy, and my mind wasn't there because I haven't done videos in a long time, and I'm really struggling, and I've been trying to get back over the last few years in and out with these video things. So, Allah, please forgive me, and for not following through on my commitments, and for you, Akhi, again, I know you've been waiting, and I apologize. So, inshallah, this will maybe get the ball rolling, and we can get started. So, he'd asked me to do some videos, maybe a series of videos on tips and tricks for new Muslims, converts, reverts, whatever label you prefer. Like, how do you convince, once you accept Islam, how do you convince your parents? And we can extend that into like friends and families and co-workers. How do you convince people of the change, right? Of the changes that you're making, right? I'm going to tell a few stories, so this might be a little longer than the original plan of the video, but I think that there's a few examples I can give. I think first and foremost, I'm not a big fan of the word convince, at least in terms of how we use convince, because when we use that word, yes, it can mean persuade and the technicalities of the word itself linguistically, but I think that when people want to convince, there's this tendency to be aggressive and push, and that's not a good thing. So I don't take that approach. So I was told when I first accepted Islam, I think about almost 3 months after I accepted Islam, I ran to a brother, and it was a very profound kind of knowledge and information that he gave me. He said, "Don't talk to your wife about Islam." So that's my first tip. Don't feel the need to rush out and tell everybody that you're a Muslim now and then try to convert them all, right? Try to get them to embrace Islam. What you need to do is, he said, just focus on yourself. Learn about the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, learn about Islam, learn your prayers, and just follow his example. And I came home a year later, and my wife and I had a lot of history and a lot of problems, and she said to me, "You're not the man I married." And I was like, subhanAllah, I thought that was going to be it, divorce time. And so, but then she said, and I kind of was dumbfounded, she says, "You're not the man I married, but with Islam, I see you becoming the man I've always wanted you to be." And I was really caught off guard with this. And what had happened was I made some dramatic changes in my life. I didn't focus on her. I wasn't worried about her. I wasn't worried about her accepting me, the changes I was making. It was not even, yes, subconsciously it was there, but I really fought against doing it because I accepted Islam for me. It was a change that I needed, and that's why I made the choice. So when she said this, she kind of confessed that she did confess that she had been studying Islam for quite a while, and 6-7 months reading behind the scenes, and she said, "I want to accept Islam." And so I was told this too, and I found it later, through studying more of the Prophet's life and example, that some of the most profound examples of people accepting Islam at his time had nothing to do with Islam per se. Right? And by that I mean sharing the information of Islam. He didn't talk about Islam. He didn't talk about the Quran. And he didn't talk about what Allah said here and did there. Many of the most profound situations were just him practicing Islam, being good character, being of good character, and doing what was best. His enemies, he was polite and respectful to, and there was examples of where they were having problems with the Jews in the community, and funerals would go by, and he would stand up and he would tell the people, the Muslims, and say, "Look, he's a human being. He's a creation of Allah. Show respect." Right? Zayd, his adopted son, this was a boy who was kidnapped and raised in Khadija's home, and then eventually given to the Prophet ﷺ as a servant. And when the father found out where he was, he came and he said, "Look, the one condition, the Prophet Muhammad says, he's free. I'll let him go, but the one condition is let him decide what he wants to do." Right? And he rejected his own father. He says, "I can't leave this guy. This guy is so amazing. His character and his behavior, I can't. You're my father, but sorry, but this guy is like, that's where I want to be." And it had nothing to do, and this story actually happened before Revelation started. And there's many examples like this, that it wasn't about him convincing people. It wasn't about him standing and debating. I'm not a fan of these Hyde Park type things. I understand it can be fun. Like, I like these debates and sometimes, but this uncontrolled yelling and screaming at each other in the park, I don't find them productive. I find them more frustrating. I actually get more upset with the brothers that are doing this because I see that their behavior is not beneficial. It's just a bunch of guys yelling about their opinions, and it's amazing how many people I see on the sides going, it just turns them off completely. And the argument is, I don't like, look at these guys, look at what they're doing, yelling and screaming at each other in a park. And, you think you're being intellectual, but the behavior is not wise, right? The Prophet didn't do this. He didn't fight and debate and argue in big crowds of people trying to convince everybody that he was right and that the Quraysh were wrong. He didn't do this, right? He would point out things, but that was it. He would quickly say something, that was it, and he'd move along, but his focus was he was just focused on being who he was. And it was this impact of who he was. The example of when he came back to take over Mecca, many people accepted Islam. He gave them, he said, you don't have to accept Islam. You can stay, but we're going to make some changes. And these people, many of them had been killing his friends and his family. His uncle were killed in a battle. Like, they had been persecuting and torturing and beating and murdering the Muslims for years. And he walked in and he had the power, and he could have wiped out the entire community, killed, executed everybody, and he didn't. He gave them a choice, right? Just, if you're going to live here, then you have to follow these rules. If not, you can leave, right? Only a couple of people were executed, and that's because even in the end, their crimes were so high that there was no escaping it. Some people went above and beyond what was even considered acceptable in battle. So anyway, that's a different story. But so again, it's all about the behavior. And I think that's the most important tip that I think I can give anybody, is that, so if you're dealing with your parents, if you're young, my experiences are going to be different. So these principles may only help in some ways. But if you are struggling with your parents, remember, yes, Allah tells us to not break the ties. And I think there's a big problem with the way this topic is presented. And breaking ties or cutting ties with family does not mean that you bow down and your parents say jump and you say how high. It means that if your parents are abusive to you, you take a break, leave, find a place to go, right? It's, alhamdulillah, I was out of the house and stuff like that. My parents weren't like that with me. It's a whole different issue, but let's say they were. I was out and I would leave and I would do my thing, but then you just call your parents and say, look, hey, how are you doing today, mom, dad? I miss you. I love you. You try to be civil and just try to connect. And they say, you know what? Your dad hurt his back. Your mom is sick. I need you to come over and help. And no problem. That's maintaining ties of kinship. But then you get there and your dad says, I want you to do this, I want you to do that, and these are against Islam. Go to the liquor store for me. Go buy me some, let's say you come from that type of environment where there's a lot of drinking. Canada, it's one of our biggest pastimes. How destructive it is for our society, we don't care. We make a lot of money off of it, and a lot of people get drunk and seem to have fun, but we don't learn from the impact of how destructive this is. So it's a huge problem with many people. And when you accept Islam and all of a sudden, I was a party guy all the time. I was known for my drinking, astaghfirullah. And so when I stopped drinking, it was like everybody I knew pretty much disappeared from my life, because now I'm not the party guy anymore. So, but I still treat them with respect when I see them. I was polite. My mom struggled with me because I got very serious about stuff. And again, if I just taken more of a soft approach and I'm trying, like, some of the things that have changed, I think, that are positive for me and my mom was, I never used to hug her. I never used to kiss her. I never used to tell her I loved her. These were just things I was not comfortable doing. And I was really awkward at the beginning for a long time, for a couple of years even, right? I felt really weird hugging my mom and kissing her and telling her I love her. Now it's normal. It's second nature. And I realized that I should have been doing it all along. So that's kind of what I'm getting at, is just focus on your own behavior. Don't worry about convincing them through discussion. Don't worry about convincing them through a good example would be for the young brothers. A lot of times we get very excited and then we start putting on a kufi, maybe wear a thobe, because it's also a cultural thing. You're kind of trying something new and it's very exciting. So one of the ways around that is to don't do those things in front of your parents, because they're not a religious obligation, right? Like, you don't have to do these things. So just take the things away that if you notice that they're having some culture shock, just take that aside and just say, Mom, it's okay. Don't worry about it. If you have any questions, just ask. But don't be bringing it up all the time. Let them bring it up. You just find ways. Be creative. That's the other thing too. You have to be creative. Find ways that you can do things for your friends and family, and particularly your parents. So these are the types of things that we can do as a community, right? It doesn't have to be this aggressive, taking a sledgehammer and convince them that Islam is the truth, right? If they ask you a question, just honestly answer the question. Don't give them, it's not easy because you get excited, especially when you have an opportunity to talk about your religion and your beliefs. It's very exciting. But try to keep it in a minimal and let them ask the questions and just try to give them the best of answers. And if you notice certain questions keep coming up, get better at answering those questions, right? Because if the question keeps coming up, that means you haven't really answered it that well for them. So, these are just some of the ways that I've approached things. My father-in-law passed away in February of this year. I took care of him. Things were a bit weird and strange where he was, being sick and all that. But through the process, I got to really know him. And he finally, after, decade of him not being happy with, because he's a Catholic, born and raised, and an older generation, and my change to Islam, his daughter followed, and he wasn't happy with that. But in the end, shortly, about a month or two before he died, he came to me and said, "You know what? I like you a lot better as a Muslim." And it wasn't because I sat there and debated with him and tried to convince him that Islam. I just took the principles of, and especially the example of the Prophet, of how he lived Islam, how he took the Quran, and how he tried to present it through his actions. And that's what I've been focusing on. I like the idea of sharing it verbally, talking and debating. I do like this in a controlled environment when I know people are going to be respectful. But I learned too that if people aren't going to be, even my parents, right? If they're not interested, I don't push this on them, right? I hope that they will ask more. I want them to see that I am making changes and I am struggling, and that's part of the process. So as I said, I think that's the greatest tip that I think any of us can learn, is just change your behavior. I was questioned when I first accepted Islam because of my boss. It just bad timing, really, to be honest. It was just bad timing. I had been working and I had been struggling and I'd been learning about Islam. And I was seen as this party kind of guy. And the one brother had actually said to me, I was the last person he ever thought would accept Islam, just because of the way I lived my life and the way I was just the way I was just so like I just was too much into drinking and partying, and I just never even considered it. So, but his brother sat with me for a long time, and I went to them and started asking them questions. And so I had to go through this struggle where during the process, just around the time when I was accepting Islam, they shifted, and his brother, both of them, but the one brother became my boss, right? So all of a sudden they felt that there was this, he's accepting Islam to get in with the boss kind of thing. So I had to go through some of that, right? But, here it is now, 13 years later, I'm still a Muslim, so joke's on you, right? No, I was serious about it. And I think that's the biggest thing. Take it seriously, but be soft about it, Okay, so hope this works out. Inshallah, we'll do some more of these types of things if that's what the brother wants. And it's probably a little bit longer than he'd hoped for, but when I get started, it's hard to stop, Okay, so I pray this is beneficial to you. Please put any comments. I'm starting a new channel, kind of getting away some of the old negative stuff from my old stuff. So I think I'm going to start a new channel. And in this case, just put questions in the things that you'd like me to talk about in terms of tips and tricks for new Muslim convert, revert, the things that I've experienced and the things I can share. Just put them in the comments below, and maybe that'll help me make more videos in terms of just the creativity of what I should be talking about. So may Allah make it easy. And I pray that for those of you out there struggling with family, that you can find a way to connect with them, right? Just be a good person to them the best you can. And in the end, Allah will reward you, right? And if you can't deal with your family because they're just too aggressive and angry, just take a break, right? That's to maintain the ties of kinship. You just have to be there when the opportunity is there for you to return and be with your family. That's what that means. It doesn't mean that you have to sit there and take the abuse from them. So I'll talk about that in another issue, because I know that comes up a lot, especially culturally. A lot of people struggle with that one. So that might be another good video. So assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.